Oh yeah, here we go again on another wonderful day. Happy Tuesday. Taco Tuesday?
Happy Tuesday.
Or is it
Hey,
Wednesday?
Ben, today's Tuesday. I know for a
Today's
fact
Tuesday.
because I drove to San Mateo.
Yeah, Taco Tuesday. Who likes tacos? I like tacos.
I
Who
love
doesn't?
tacos.
What's your favorite
Ben, how
taco?
are you?
What's up, Ben?
Hey guys, nice to be with you.
Pleasure to be with you.
My favorite tacos. I just made lengua tacos sous vide the other day. 2 hours in the sous vide at 170 degrees.
Oh, good for you, man.
It's some good stuff.
Oh,
I didn't know
Hopefully
you
people are not
I didn't know you
vegetarians.
cooked. That's amazing, bro.
did you fry them up after? Or
Oh
did
yeah,
you?
you gotta do that with some duck fat.
Oh my God, there you go. All right.
Low
I
calorie.
love it.
All right, happy Taco Tuesday for sure.
All right. For those of you who don't know, Ben Howard is the man in El Dorado County and Sacramento area. He is one of my favorite realtors out there, and he is an expert in that area. And we are always he's one of the leadership team on the masterminds, Monday morning masterminds, which is a group of leaders who come on and talk about the market on Mondays. We'd love to have you on that as well. And you guys all know Luis.
What's up? Thank you.
So the topic today is once again this NAR lawsuit. It's just everywhere, and it's funny, Ben. I was at an open house this weekend, and I know we have new forms. We have open house sign-in sheets. We have open house buyer representation. Blah blah blah. There's like 4 new forms, and the realtor I was with didn't have those forms and didn't really care for a second. And I talked to another realtor company and in the Los Gatos area, and they were like, "Oh, well, we'll just see what happens and we'll wing it." But I think that's a dangerous approach. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important to know the regulations. And if you don't know the regulations, you could be putting your seller at a disadvantage and yourself and your broker at a disadvantage. Understanding the changes in the law and the NAR settlement and how it impacts an open house is just as important as understanding the changes when it comes to representing a buyer or a seller, because there are lots of opportunities in open house to say or do the wrong thing, and you don't want to be in that position.
You know, my biggest fear is that I've heard that there's a lot of lawyers just standing in the wings and waiting to pounce on people who are actually not doing the right thing.
And it's not even just that. I mean, I guess in a way, that's a checks and balances system that we have as a society. Probably more than anything, it's just a matter of being able to know that you're doing the best as a fiduciary role for your client, which is all of our jobs. And that should be the number one. That should be the number one priority. You mentioned open houses, and I had an open house a couple weeks ago, actually 2, for a seller, and we had 173 people through 13 and a half hours of open house.
Wow. Are you serious?
Yeah, 173 people. One open house was 7 hours, one was 6.5 hours, one was a Saturday, the other was a Sunday. And, if for people out there that are saying, oh, it's really hard to get these forms done or get some type of conversation going with the people that walk in, you can imagine in that type of traffic situation, it may be challenging, but there's routes to that. If somebody's coming through an open house with an agent, well, that agent doesn't have to have a buyer representation agreement if they're just going to a public at open house. But if they are going out with their clients looking at houses generally, then they definitely do need to have a buyer representation agreement under the new NAR agreement, at least in the state of California. I'm not an attorney. I'm not speaking on behalf of my broker, which is real, by the way, but I am telling you based off of the training which I've received, this is my understanding.
Right. The forms are interesting because I think it actually makes it easier for me to ask people to sign in. A lot of people were hesitant to sign in before. My motto this weekend was, "Hey guys, I'm sorry, a lot of changes happened this weekend, and it's required by law for you to sign in. And are you represented by a realtor? Yes, no." And it was a lot easier for them to actually just put in their name instead of putting John Doe or whatever it was. So it made the conversation a lot easier for us to palate.
You may get people that still object, and that's fine. My understanding is that they can still come through the open house. But if they are represented and they're coming through, they definitely need to be disclosing that to you. If they're unrepresented and coming through and do not want to sign in, then again, it's my understanding that they can still come through, but you're going to be limited as to what you can share with them. The whole point of the paperwork or the forms or the sign-in is to let the person coming in know that you are working on behalf of the seller.
Right.
And I think in the past that hasn't always been entirely clear. Dual agency exists, as you probably know, when somebody represents both sides of a transaction. But actually, dual agency also exists when the same broker represents both sides of a transaction. And dual agency is legal in California.
Right.
So Ben,
exactly.
hold on. I want to touch on that because you say that the same broker can represent the buyer and the seller.
Yeah. So, for example, in the past, I worked for a major franchise broker many years ago, and the odds were pretty good in my community, especially that I'd be going with another agent from the same brokerage, maybe even the same office.
Okay. But it cannot be the same agent, right? Well, it's not recommended because
the same agent can do both sides of a transaction as well. I've done that twice out of, 65 transactions. I've done it twice, but I did not always feel as though it would be the best thing. And after doing so, and so I think that it's a decision an agent has to make whether or not they would like to represent both sides. At the time, it was the best thing for my clients, but again, going forward, it may not be. It depends on the situation. But it is dual agency if the agent is representing the seller and the buyer. Like, for example, if somebody comes through an open house and it's your listing, it's also dual agency if the same broker represents both sides of a transaction.
So how do you represent both to the fullest, right? Because you're supposed to represent the seller. You're in their corner and you're fighting for everything you can for them. But also the buyer. I still don't understand how that works. And I know it happens a lot, but
yeah, every agent is going to probably answer that differently. If I average 8 offers on my listings, and so the odds are, if I were to be representing both sides, there's going to be 7 other offers on average. And if you're going to go out and take a best and final bid from somebody, best and final offer from somebody that you're representing, you better get that in writing ahead of time before you solicit any others from any other agents. And so that way you can maintain your reputation in the community of agents by saying, hey, this is what I've done. Here's a screenshot of it. Here's where we were, so that way another agent knows that, maybe their offer wasn't accepted and maybe my offer with the buyer was accepted, but at least I have a time and date stamp and an email showing that that's when they made their best and final offer. So I think every agent's going to probably handle that differently. And I love my concern more than anything, to be honest, was after the transaction closed, I felt like I didn't have the same rapport with the buyers that I did with the sellers. And I think maybe it's because, as an agent representing a seller, we try to do our very best and get as much as we can for them, the best terms, the best offer. But sometimes when a buyer sees that, then they're going to think maybe we're working more for the seller. So
I know it gets a little weird there.
It does. Yeah. So just like anything else, probably in lending or any industry, really, there's probably ways that people handle it that are better and ways that people handle it that are worse. And we all, we're practicing real estate agents, just like a practicing physician or a practicing attorney. We're all practicing getting better. And then when new regulations come along like this, we see a lot of different opinions from agents, particularly on social media, of their feelings about these regulations. And that can sort of snowball a course of negativity, misunderstanding, rumors, you name it, that are not true. And if you want, we can discuss some of that too. But on open houses specifically, to your question, yeah, that's what I see.
Ben, you had 173 people walk through, or sorry, 173 groups. That's amazing. Were you by yourself?
173 people. I count children as people, by the way. So let's be fair. Right. Yeah, I was by myself. I had snacks, keep people busy,
Okay. That's
I put notes around the house, feature call outs. So if I don't get the chance to tell everybody that walks in every feature about the house, they're still able to read it.
Nice. And everybody signed in, no problem. You didn't have any issues there whatsoever?
I did not. So this is 3 weeks ago. The sign-ins were not required at the time.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And I also did not have a lender with me. I was there by myself.
All right. This is going to shift how buyers are going to go out there and shop, I think. Have you seen that shift at all in your market, in the business that you're doing?
Yeah. So I have worked with clients where I've done buyer representation agreements, which now, just for everybody's clarity, buyer representation agreements are required in the state of California. on every time you work with a buyer. It can be done different ways. It can be done in a formal buyer representation agreement. It can be done in a touring agreement. It depends on what your broker and you are comfortable with, and probably the level of commitment which you're getting from a client. But going back to my point, I had somebody who did a buyer representation agreement, and on the other side of the transaction, the seller had a certain amount that they were offering compensation, and my buyer compensation was higher. I do a listing presentation when I list a home, and when I represent a buyer, I do a buyer representation presentation as well. Something I think all agents would benefit from in this transition. They probably should have been doing it all along, but if not, this is definitely the reminder that to treat it like a business and have a buyer representation presentation and explain what you offer, explain your numbers. Everybody should know their numbers. I average 4 homes shown to a buyer, right? So if you talk to an agent, you say, look, for every buyer you've represented, 30 buyers, 40 buyers, whatever, 100 buyers, what's the average number of homes you showed that buyer before an offer was accepted? And, that number being lower is actually more of a positive, because that means that you are working with that client, listening to that client, screening, according to what they're telling you, doing a lot of, things before you've even seen the house to rule it in, rule it out. I also averaged the ones that are accepted average 2.5 offers, which means that mine was 1 of 2.5. So I'm going against 2.5 offers total, including mine. And that should be a number that the agent knows as well, because if you're getting your offer accepted over other offers, the more other offers there are, then that generally means that you're writing a more favorable offer because of terms, price, etc., relationships with the other agents. But going back to my conversation I had with this particular buyer, we had a buyer representation agreement, and it had a certain amount of payment to me. So as this new legislation goes through and we all have to have these representation agreements, we should feel confident in how we're presenting those to the clients. And it should be an early discussion, and it has to be before we show property. Right. And so, the seller on this particular house was offering less, and my clients, wrote into the offer, like they would write in a refrigerator or a washer or dryer, or want to close in so many days, or a seller in possession rent back, or whatever. They wrote in the terms to match my agreement, and we included part of the agreement with the offer so that way it gave it credibility. So, to confidentiality with clients, I won't discuss the rest of how it played out, but everybody out there should take from this podcast that, you want to have a buyer presentation. That's really important. Show your value, know your numbers, and then that will potentially help you argue for what you're worth, regardless of what the seller is offering. Because remember, under the new regulation, it's not that the seller's broker is paying the buyer's broker any longer. It's now completely different, and we all need to remember that way. We're not advertising our services as free anymore as buyer's agents. I never did, but there were a lot of people that did that. We can no longer do that. We have to be very careful about the discussion. And really what it comes down to is, I'll take a line from the president of my broker, who's been my coach since 2017. He has this where he says, the optics, the semantics, and the mechanics are so important. The optics, of course, is how something looks. Yep. The semantics is the language and what's used. And the mechanics is the practice behind it. Once we get all 3 of those down in a way that is transparent and working in a fiduciary role as we should be, I think everything is better for the industry, and we keep ourselves out of any type of issues.
Transparency, right? Just that buyer presentation. That's important.
Decoupling of compensation is so important to understand with this legislation. And, I see all these things on social media where agents are posting, I'm going to put 3% in the lawn, or I'm going to, put 3% on the lockbox thing. You can do all of that. You can put a sign writer up on your for sale sign saying the compensation. You can stand out in front of a listing and yell. I could put on my website. I have my own website because I like to track the analytics and everything, and I drive traffic to it for a listing. My last listing, I hit 209,000 people with the Facebook ad, and I had almost 1,700 people go to the website to learn about the open house. Well, I can put on my website with 1,700 people going to it that the offer compensation is so much per what the seller has directed. Again, it's not my direction, it's what the seller has directed. And that's another key point. But I can hit far more people on my own website than I would have via the MLS. And we see that as agents, we see the back end numbers of the MLS, and that same listing might have had 129 agents see the listing, and maybe 30 consumers see the listing. It shows up in their little search. So I have far more exposure through my own ways of doing it. So for me, not showing a compensation or offer a compensation in the MLS is really trivial. But I guess based off what I see on social media, this is like a really big thing for a lot of agents, and they feel like it's going to hurt them. And I think it kind of goes back to during COVID times when we had to do these forms called PED forms. Every time you want to do a showing, you had to get a PED form. So I had a listing one time that we had 79 offers and we had 196 PEDs, 196. And I had to receive all of those and, go through them all. And I'm thinking, like if we've got over those hurdles, that we had back during COVID, this type of stuff they're talking about now is honestly really not a big thing. We need to understand, again, I'll refer back to the president of my broker when he gave trainings, and he mentioned there's 2 routes to the same destination, and all we're doing is taking a different route. It's such a simple semantic language, but it really means the truth. We're just going a different route and understanding what the rules are. No different than a person that plays professional baseball, and there's certain rules. We just have certain rules that we need to follow.
Yeah, I think everybody's freaking out about this, to be honest with you. All the realtors that I've seen, some of them are really freaking, and some of them just don't care. I think the ones that don't care are going to get slapped on the wrist a little bit. I think the ones that are freaking out, like, I'm never going to sell a house again, I'm only going to do listings, I think they're missing out on half the equation, and all you got to do is adapt a little bit. When new rules came about for the mortgage industry, everybody had to adapt to that as well. And now everything is smooth as silk. We're all working in the same environment, right? So I just think it's that. I love what your broker said about going to Los Angeles. We're going to take the 405. We're going to take the 5. We're still going to get to Los Angeles. End of story. It just depends on which route we're going to take, and we have to just detour a little bit and just adjust the way we drive.
And Ramin, you've been on a call with me before where somebody that's on the call has said, "I will never help another buyer. I only want to help sellers from here on out." And I'm just like, yeah, I hope more agents say that. That's fantastic. That opens up more opportunity for me, because obviously there's a misunderstanding of the rules. Which are very clear and would take probably an hour or 2 for somebody to do a training and understand. But if they don't want to, that's great. I mean, I think that's fantastic.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And that's one of the reasons we're trying to share and educate. And thank you for being on here and sharing this. And the social media exposure, that's such a big point that you just made, Ben. Like I don't think you realize. Because we're all the agents, they're kind of stuck on, the MLS. Well, if you look at the data and you're only getting 100 views on MLS, yet you can post it on social media, but really post it and boost it, right? Like do it right. I mean, you're going to get far more exposure. And by that, I mean, to all the agents out there that do this, doesn't mean just post it on your feed and then that's it, because you're going to get 5 views or 10.
Well, especially with the algorithm changes in Facebook. I don't know if you've noticed how many suggested things are coming up now. It used to be all just, sponsored ads would come up and then you'd see all your friends again on there and more sponsored ads. But now it's like you have very little of anybody you have the same amount of sponsored ads or more, and then you have all these suggested for you things in your feed. So the odds of you actually seeing something that somebody's posted are actually fairly slim, depending on how much traction they have. And there's tactics behind getting more attention to a post, and that sometimes relates to what you've pre-posted a day or 2 before to get engagement, and that engagement triggers the algorithm to then boost your next post. Sure. And again, that's all things that you could learn as an agent, just like you could learn the advertising and what works and what doesn't. I think really what it comes down to is just, if somebody's working with an agent, whether it be a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, they really need to be familiar and be able to clearly define their value. And that value should come from many different things, both the statistics, as I mentioned, they should be able to tell you, but also they should understand this lawsuit, and they should understand what is allowed and what's not allowed. And, it wouldn't hurt a client to go look at the social media feed of that agent and see what they're saying,
Sure.
And because are they the type of person that's going to be really emotional and react a certain way?
Right. Yeah. You're right.
And at the same time, if you have an agent that, does their own website, that does their own Facebook advertising, they can speak to the technology, that would be a different level of agent to me if I was a client than somebody that's done things the same way for so many years and wants to continue doing them that way. Because, we all we all can benefit from another agent. Certainly people with a lot of experience are great at relationships and all of the things about networking. But then there's a different level of agent that also is out there, and that's somebody that's going to be able to tell you the analytics of a Facebook ad or the traffic and how many minutes somebody's spending on your website once they do go over. So if I'm averaging 2 minutes and 21 seconds for all of those 1,600 plus, people that clicked through to the site off the ad, that's substantial, because that means they're viewing the Matterport 3D tour. They're viewing the video of the house. They're viewing 79 different photos that you've posted. They're reading the descriptions. And by the way, there's a lot of things that we already haven't been allowed to put in the MLS. I can't put neighborhood park pictures unless it's part of an HOA where they're funding it from the HOA. Even though our property tax dollars are paying for the neighborhood parks, we can't put those in. I can't put in that picture of that shopping center and the stores that are in there. I'm limited in my number of characters I can put for a description on the MLS. Whereas if I do it on my own site and I drive traffic to that, I can put anything I want as long as it's legal. And again, that would be important anyway.
Well,
I was on a call this morning.
Hold on. Let me stop that again, because what you just said is huge. Like, you can post whatever you want on your website. So you have to focus as an agent. You have to focus on driving traffic to your site. And if you don't have a site, a real site, not one of those MLS, because a lot of agents use their MLS.
I have both, right? Why not have both? It's not an either or. You can have your own primary, and then you can have your IDX feed, and that ties in with your CRM, and both have their own audiences and their own applications.
Right, that's huge. I think that was the biggest nugget right now that you have dropped.
I was on broker tour this past week, and somebody from a major franchise broker is up there talking, and they said that they were going through the different rules, and they're talking about broker tour and what we're going to see on tour, and they're reminding everybody they're not allowed to talk about offers of compensation and all those things because, again, it's not allowed to be in the MLS. And I raised my hand for clarity, and I said, it's my understanding that we're not allowed to put the offer compensation in the MLS, but we're also not allowed to discuss it when we're here, like at this meeting, if I hand somebody a flyer about the house. And they said no, because at least our local tour is put on by the MLS, essentially by the association, the local association of realtors. And therefore, as part of this regulation, you're not allowed to do that. So I thought, well, that's really interesting, because we're out there to network and meet people and do like things. But it's interesting that they don't do it.
So that's interesting. So it's a rule now. You're not allowed to do it at that marketing meeting. But I guess it would be the same thing for us at Score. Score has been very limiting in terms of what we can talk about, what we can't talk about, right? I guess it's just a liability thing for these guys.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah. And everybody's careful about liability now, because obviously there's a focus on us. As there probably should be. We always want to do the best we can, and maybe inadvertently we weren't. And so therefore now we can, right? We have an opportunity. Understanding that it used to be broker to broker compensation, and it no longer is broker to broker compensation. And we need to do everything we possibly can as agents and an industry and brokers to have true decoupling away from broker to broker compensation. That's what's going to get us past this.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's going to revert back to the days of the fax where, brokers were sending out faxes to all the houses and saying, hey, here's what we have. These 5 listings are ours now for the next week or whatever it is, 2 weeks. And then every day you'd get a stack of faxes that came through from all the brokerages. Do you think that's going to go back to something like that?
It would be my opinion, as somebody that used to sell fax machines in the mid 90s, that would not be in the client's best interest on either side of the transaction, let alone the agent's best interest. But as fiduciaries for the client, putting the client first and foremost, I think it would be interesting to see somebody present an argument why that's in their best interest. It's the same reason why, it's probably not in the client's best interest for somebody to do a coming soon within their own brokerage, because if you're trying to really get the maximum amount of exposure for a seller, and you're not essentially doing that by putting out ahead of time, unless you're delaying when offers are received, maybe. But otherwise, I think you're really putting somebody at a disadvantage that way.
Interesting. Okay.
We want to cast as wide a net as possible. So when I do a Facebook ad, I might do 26-mile radius. And it used to be you could do a 3-mile radius and you could put certain things and all that to sort it, but you can't because of fair housing. And it's actually really good that you can't, because it needs to be 15-mile or larger radius. And that's a good thing, because you probably do really want to cast a wider net, because you never know when somebody lives outside that radius is going to be interested. And so why not get them to see it.
And another thing I came across this weekend was a couple of people walked in and said, I asked them if they're represented. They said, my agents, blah, blah, blah. I said, what company do they work with? And they came back with Redfin. And I was interesting because Redfin has a business model, as you know, they show what $80 to get to show you a home, and then to get a certain commission when it's finished. I don't know internally how they're handling that. I haven't spoken to any Redfin agents at all, but I'd be curious to see how Redfin's handling that. And what do you think this is going to imply for their future business model for the Redfins of the world?
So I have a couple kids, and I see everything from the perspective of a parent. And there's things I can change with my kids. I can get them to school on time. I can pick them up instead of them standing at the curb and getting a call from the office. I can try to make sure they get their homework done, and maybe that they're nice to other people once in a while. But there's things I can't change. I can't change that they're short, right? I can't change that maybe they're not very athletic. And I don't focus on what I can't change. I focus what I can change. And so if I'm looking at the real estate business, I've always been the person to say, what can I do to change? What can I do that's different than everybody else? If everybody else has a brochure box on their for sale sign, and it rains and water gets in the brochure box because the lid doesn't close automatically every time because it's simply weighted, well, I'm going to get a brochure box that does. And if the sign company doesn't offer it, I'm going to get one on Amazon, and I'm going to put it on the sign myself. Right? Same thing. I'm going to put a light on the for sale sign so people can see it during dark hours. Right? Okay, he's going to be dark, and people are going to drive by the house. So why are the signs not illuminated? Well, I'm going to put that out there, but the sign company doesn't offer it, or the people don't do it. So focus on what you can change, and don't worry about what. I'm really happy that there's other brokers out there, maybe including what you mentioned, that are willing to help a group of clients that need the help. Maybe those people don't know what they don't know. Maybe they don't realize that there are agents out there that are willing to invest in third-party tools to make them a more knowledgeable buyer. Like maybe they need to be told that. And if they're not told that, well, that's not the other broker's fault. That's my fault. Like I need to be out there telling them that. I need to be investing in education for people. And I can't help everybody. So if I can help those who understand what I'm willing to offer to put them at an advantage over other buyers, I'm going to give them a map on every home that we're going to go look at so that they can see in the neighborhood which homes are owner occupied and which are not. Wow. I'm going to give them a map that shows estimated owner equity for every home in a neighborhood so they can go into a neighborhood that's more likely to be stable the next time there's an economic cycle and there's foreclosures. I'm going to give them property tax records. I'm going to give them mortgage records. I'm going to give them property history. I'm going to give them, I can go on and on and on. My point is that if you're offering things when you're a listing agent, like you're paying for staging, or you're paying for photography or videography or Matterport 3D or house cleaning or window cleaning or staging, you're paying for these things on a listing. Yep. Well, now you have to do a buyer representation agreement, and you needed a buyer representation appointment. Why are you not offering buyers detailed crime maps? We're not allowed to steer people. We certainly shouldn't, but we can go to a third-party source per NAR. I can give them fire map, risks from fire risk maps from 3 different sources. I can give them third-party market data through, a third-party provider that's real time to the day versus the stuff that we get through the MLS that's once a month. Right. Those are the type of things that your agent should be giving you to make you not want to go to the others that you mentioned.
That's totally next level, Ben. And I see you're honestly an anomaly, I think, amongst the people that I've spoken to.
I hope so.
Yeah, you are, because I don't think many people even know their own statistics. Like you're saying, it takes 2.5 offers for my past sales to get a hit. I don't think I've spoken to anybody that has that kind of statistics on themselves, which is amazing. So that's great. And I love that you're treating this like a listing. Actually, you're absolutely right. Your buyer presentation should be the same as a listing agreement. You're pulling out all the stops on the listing agreement. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Well, tell me what you're going to do as a buyer. Tell me how you're going to represent me. Why should I go with you instead of the 300 other people that lined up behind you saying, "Come with me, come with me, come with me." Besides,
if I'm going to do a listing presentation, I'm going to say my average is 31,000 over, and I have 8 offers, and I'm 6 days on market. That's my average, right? Yeah. Then why would I not do the same thing for buyers? It's just as important, right? To all of us.
Right.
There's probably more work that goes into a listing.
Well, I think before, because it was free, right? The services were free. It didn't really matter. hey, you're getting this for free, so come on, let's go help you buy a house.
Right.
So I think these changes are going to definitely change the quality of the service, the quality of that buyer's agent. So I dig. Just all that social media negative doom and gloom stuff. That's the stuff that like you got to rip through it and then break through it and drown it out with some good, because it's horrible.
Well, even my own personal growth in this industry, from coming from Wells Fargo, Bank of America, I was never allowed to do the things I'm doing now, marketing myself on Instagrams and LinkedIn's and YouTubes and stuff like that. It's been a growth experience for me, and I think all the agents that are going to stay in the game need to grow. And you're absolutely right, Ben. They need to step up and show their prowess, and not just rely on, hey, I'm with this company or that company, and you should come with me because of X, Y, or Z. But now you need to really show me the money, show me what you're doing, which is great. I think it's valuable for the next level realtor, right?
Can we touch on the way to handle the seller paying the buyer broker directly? I mean, remember, the seller's paying the buyer broker directly, the buyer's paying the buyer broker directly. It's maybe a combination of the seller paying the buyer broker directly and the buyer paying the buyer broker directly. But in no way is one broker, the listing broker, paying the buyer's broker. And I think that comes up questions fairly often. How should we handle this? Should we do the lawn mowing? Should we do the sign writer? Should we do it on our website? Should we do the key tag? You may want to. You certainly are allowed to. You just can't put it in the MLS. But let me give a different perspective, and I think it really should depend on the listing. Just like I might suggest to somebody they have a room painted, right? Well,
Right.
it's going to depend on the listing. Well, I think you might want to reconsider whether or not you want to tell the other side what the seller is willing to offer for compensation. And here's why. If you want to attract people to the listing, if that's the goal of putting something out there anywhere other than the MLS of the compensation, that's fine. But if you're working as a fiduciary for your seller, is it in the seller's best interest for you to tell everybody the percentage which the seller is offering?
I agree with that.
Because you may find that just like you're not including the refrigerator unless they ask, unless it's the right offer, or you're not including the washer and dryer or that spa or whatever is detached on the property, why would you want the seller to offer up more money than they need to? I mean, the whole point of an offer is to get the price and the terms that this best interest for the seller. Well, the price is one thing, but terms are also very important for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there's two ways to go about this. You can tell a buyer's agent, my seller's open to paying buyer representation compensation based on the terms of the offer. So I'll say it again. My seller's open to paying buyer representation compensation based on the terms of the offer. Meaning, write a decent offer with good terms, and maybe it'll work out well for you.
Well, just like the fridge, right? If you want to include the fridge and the washer and dryer,
and maybe you're going to list a home where you're going to hold out on that until you wait to see what happens during the investigation contingency, and they end up writing in that they want stuff and money, and you're like, how about a 350-pound refrigerator? Because you certainly don't want to move one of those instead, right? So by leaving it open versus just throwing it out there, the percentage,
Yep.
At least in the beginning, it seems to me like you're working more in your client's best interest. Now, again, everything needs to be seller directed, right? So I should say that again, you probably want to have seller instructions on this, just like we do for any other terms of an offer that they're putting out there, like an offer deadline or whatever. But by just saying the seller's willing to offer compensation of a certain amount, when you don't even know what the offer is, how much interest there is, how many offers there's going to be. I mean, the listing that I mentioned with 173 people coming through just had 5 offers, right? And we ended up substantially over the listing price. So in that case, well, then why would we need to pay as much, right? Now, again, this is before this whole thing took place, but going forward with people in the future. Now, that said, maybe what you do is in your seller instructions that, again, nobody's really seeing other than you and your broker, maybe you write in that after 2 weeks of being on market or 3 weeks of being on market, you're going to have the number published everywhere except for the MLS. And that's when you put your rider out, and that's when you mention it on your website and drive the hits to it, and that's when you mention it at your open houses.
As a strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for a buyer's agent, again, I've represented more buyers than I have listings. So I see it from that perspective too, and understand that you want to go out there and get something for your efforts. That's why we're so frustrated with sometimes the new home builders when there's no compensation. But, that's where it goes back to your buyer representation agreement and your buyer presentation, just like you'd have a listing presentation, and you showing the value in your track record and being able to do that.
That's right.
I agree with you. That's great.
You leave it up to the buyer, right?
Right.
It's going to be up to the buyer and the sellers. It's that. Yeah. I love that.
We got a
I
question
love that
from the
perspective.
audience, Ben. It says, we see some agents are putting on MLS in private section. The buyer's agents are welcome. Are we still allowed to do that? I think you can put whatever you want on MLS, right?
Well, you can't put whatever you want because you can't put anything related to offers of compensation, and you can't put anything that hints it. So you can't try to get funny with the numbers in the listing or something so that it indicates what you're looking to pay. Okay. Saying that buyer agents are welcome, I think, is fairly obvious because of the fact that it's listed in the MLS where other agents are going to see it. So, I guess it could be said, but for somebody to read something into that, I think, again, it goes back to there's not a lot of point to it if you are already doing everything you can to help a buyer's agent. So, for example, if I have a listing, I'm doing not only photography, but I'm doing twilight photography and videography and Matterport, and I'm doing the inspections, the home pest roof ahead of time, and I'm doing seller disclosures ahead of time in their own handwriting so people know that they actually filled it out and did it correctly, to their best of knowledge. And I'm putting it all in as attachments into the MLS. Well, anybody who's a buyer's agent is going to see those tools as a way to make this whole transaction go so much smoother. So I am helping a buyer's agent based off of the things that I'm doing ahead of time before they've even seen the property. Mm-hmm. So I think you could, I don't know, I'm not an attorney, like I said, it seems to me like you could put that in there, but you'd want to consult your broker possibly if you had that question. But either way, you're already essentially doing the same thing if you're doing a thorough job for your seller. Agreed. And again, but anyways, I'm against any kind of code speak. I wouldn't have the price end in 3 or 25, and I wouldn't, I think anybody that's talking about these type of things, where it is in the MLS is really going to get on the edge of a fine, and a lot of these fines are automatic, $500 to $2,500 automatic, and I don't think there's any real benefit to getting a fine like that. I'd rather spend that on a nice dinner, or better yet, on my client's listing. There you go. So, why take the risk as a listing agent when it probably is not going to make any beneficial difference to your seller if you're already doing the other things that I mentioned to drive traffic to the house?
Well, yeah, that private third-party website, Facebook, all of that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of realtors are struggling with that too. Ben, you're pretty tech savvy and you've got your game together. I think a lot of realtors are just using a typical site that would Coldwell Banker would give them, or Compass would give them and say, hey, this is my website and this is my CRM. It's an IDX thing, and that's it. I'm just going to go live with it. Give me some business cards. I want to go out and hustle. I think that's what a lot of folks are doing. Whereas you've taken the time to develop your Facebook profiles and understand Facebook ads and what drives it, understand the algorithm. I think that sets you apart again from the rest of the crowd. I think it's time to game up for a lot of folks just to get in there and understand the game a little bit better. And
I don't want to spend $42,000 on Facebook more than anybody else does. I'd much rather spend that on my kids' 529s, right? But you learn things over time, and just like you'd pay for an education through anything else, you pay through an education of what you invest into Facebook. And the nice thing about it is by advertising on whatever source you're doing, you're helping your seller because you're giving them more exposure. Mm-hmm. And more exposure means generally a higher sales price. And a higher sales price not only helps the seller, but it in turn helps you. When a seller does better, you do better as well, right? Because we're all paid a percentage of the sales price. So, there's a lot of advantages. When I mentioned the things that I invest in on listings or with buyers, there's a lot of advantages of doing so. And I'm not sure why more agents get this block about technology. Take on one thing this year. It doesn't have to be everything. Just do one thing. Jump on Squarespace, get a platform, try it out. You're not going to get a lot of traffic, but that's why you need to drive traffic to it. And you're doing it at the right times, when you have a listing.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I think it's a fear of technology, I think. So,
Yeah.
I've had my own struggles with Facebook. I actually had a struggle with LinkedIn. Last night I was discussing with Lewis. I'm at the invitation limit, right? So, just getting around these technology hurdles and understanding what makes them work, I think is the key to becoming more effective.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's with a broker that requires them to use the broker's email address, that's like using a Comcast email address, and you have to go with Comcast the rest of your life. And like that is the brilliant business concept. So if you're with a major franchise broker and they're having you go with their email address all the time, they're really tying you to them for a long time. And I hope they're sending you a lot of nice gifts at the holidays, because I don't think there's an advantage to the agent for that. And if it's something to do with documentation of what's being said, well, I invite you to look at other brokers, because there's plenty of ways to do that out there.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely agreed. We're at 40 minutes right now. Ben, you're amazing. I could do this for another hour with you, honestly.
Thank you.
Great conversation, man, and great nuggets. It's actually you're coaching right now. I'd love to get your broker on there sometime too. He's got some amazing. I love the way he did that one chat you shared with us on Masterminds. It was brilliant because it changed the game. It's all about paradigm shifting, right? Looking at the pencil in a different way instead of just looking at it like this, which is what I think a lot of realtors are doing with these rules, and they're getting frustrated with it. And I don't think it should be frustration. I think it's an invitation to change. That's all it is.
So, to your point, my broker, so again, Sharon Srivatsa has been my personal coach since 2017. He became the president of my brokerage in January of 2022. I joined Real in November of 2021 when we had a little over 2,500 agents. Today, we just posted that we are at 21,000 agents.
Wow.
We are the fastest growing publicly traded brokerage in the world. But where I'm going with this, it wasn't supposed to be just an ad. Anybody from any brokerage can go to the resource that Real Broker has provided. It's just realbuyerplaybook.com. realbuyerplaybook.com. It has everything on there that we've discussed today and so much more. It even has things that you can share with your clients if you're trying to explain buyer representation agreements. I would tell you to jump on there. And I'm sorry for the plug. I didn't even plug my own website. I just plugged my broker's website, which is kind of lame.
So it's REALBYERBROKER.com.
Yeah, it's realbuyerplaybook.com.
Yeah, I see it here. Yeah.
And I work for Real Brokerage Technologies. My name is Ben Howard. My website's benhowardre.com, like real estate. It's pretty creative. It's my brand.
Real Buyer Playbook. I'm going to put that up on the screen here.
benhowardre.com.
Ben Howard, what? I'm sorry?
re.com.
RE. Bam.
Yeah, like real estate, man.
Yeah,
You go on my website, you'll see my track record, right? All the houses, the offers, how I market stuff. Oh yeah, look at you, man. You got technology down. Good job, Ramin. Putting the website up there. So this Real Buyer Playbook is amazing. It's another reason I just love my broker, because they'll do things like this out of nowhere. We didn't expect it, and you don't have to be a member. You can be an agent of any franchise broker. Why do we do it? I think we do it because we're trying to get people to consider us, because once you look into us, you're going to be like, this is such a good opportunity.
And I'm not sure if I spelled it right. Am I spelling your website right?
You sure did.
Okay, cool.
benhowardre.com.
Check it out. And also, Ben, another thing I always tell other loan agents and stuff, you see me attending all the marketing meetings, and I truly believe that you learn from your peers in this industry. And so I love coming to these meetings because I'm just a loan guy, right? But I'm learning real estate things. I'm learning real estate law. I'm learning all the other things that go along with this business. I encourage other realtors to join these marketing meetings in your whatever area you're in. You should be going. If there's 2 a week, go to 2 a week. If there's 4 a week, go to 4 a week. They're only an hour long, and you're just iron sharpens iron, right? So the more you talk about these topics and the more they're out in the open like this, the more you learn and the more you're able to beat them out. So.
And if you go on something like a broker tour, you can learn so much. You can learn how other agents in your community are conducting their business. You can learn about the houses, like which ones have, Kitech plumbing or some other thing. You can learn how somebody's marketing a house. And more importantly, if you go out there and you treat it like a vendor does, like if you guys, if you went out there as a lender and you're talking to people as a lender and all that stuff, and you see how vendors treat other agents on tour, and if you start doing it that way as an agent, you'll make so many relationships, and those relationships are the key to getting offers accepted and getting more offers. It's that simple.
Absolutely right.
It's time well spent.
It is, and it's just again, iron sharpens iron, and you're learning it. Just always be learning. I love to learn, and so this is kind of my thing. I've been just all over these meetings. I think I go to 4 or 5 a week. It depends on what week it is, but I go to Sandy's on Friday. I go to ours on Monday, which is coming back on September 3rd, right? Or September
Sandy's
5th.
in person is fantastic. We've done that trip a few times. It's really good.
We love having you out
Little
here.
lose.
And I love Morgan Hill's meeting. Actually, I'll be there tomorrow. Morgan Hill feels like a family. It's a community to me. I love pledging the allegiance to the flag. You know, everybody introduces themselves. Hey, I'm Ramin. I'm from Lone Depot. Hey, it's Ben Howard.
Yeah, we do that at ours. Both those things we do at ours. I think it's a good thing.
It's great. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really makes me feel good to be part of it. Another thing I really liked was in Morgan Hill, everybody says, "Hey Ben, thanks for taking our offer, and we're in contract at this point, and we're looking forward to a smooth transaction. Thank you, Ben Howard." And reciprocate. It's kind of cool. I like that whole riffing back and forth with the realtors. I dig it.
And I'm supposed to go the other way if you weren't on your best behavior during escrow. Like, hey Ben, you just really blew this.
Awesome, man.
It made me a little peer pressure to do a good job.
It really helps. I think it elevates everyone. But Ben, I love you, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. Great information. Huge tidbits. If you guys you need to rewind this and play back what Ben was talking to you guys about here.
Yeah, sorry I talk fast. You might want to listen to it like at half speed.
There you go. Ben talks like me. It's awesome. All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, Ben. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys.
Ben, great to meet you. Thank you.
We'll see you guys.